This is a 2RealNews special report with your host, Seth Davis.
I wrote this at the beginning of April, and it rings just as true now as it did then. Now the only difference is thousands more dead, U.S. and Saudi propagandists trying to stir up a war with Iran, and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has gained more territory due to the further destabilization of Yemen. But I digress. So without further ado, here is tonight's report. Is the assault on Yemen the next step to world war? A Layman's Guide by Seth Davis. With a people whose history reaches back into the mists of time, spanning dynasties, empires, and a vicious civil war after its reunification in 1994, modern Yemen is a relatively young country. From a land rich in the trade of aromatics such as frankincense to a modern-day oil-driven economy, the harsh landscape has made certain individuals extremely wealthy. However, the majority of Yemen's population lives in small farming and herding communities, and those that live in cities are mostly in low-paying service and labor jobs. Even after the fall of the last imam of the Mutawakkilite kingdom, Muhammad al-Badr, in 1962, a small group of special interests, the majority of them foreign, hold a vice-like grip on Yemen's wealth. Saudi Arabia and Egypt are arguably the most obvious culprits, having backed multiple factions and coups, including both al-Badr and the North Yemeni Republicans, respectively, during the North Yemen Civil War. The current conflict is the product of years of strife and regime change, including the 2011 Arab Spring Revolution, which saw the handing over of presidential powers to Abd Rabbuh Mansur Hadi, this too supported by Saudi Arabia. The number of double crosses and schisms within existing factions can be hard to keep track of, and can do much in confusing the uninformed and discouraging discussion of the subject. The spate of violence that has plagued Yemen for the greater part of a century has led to a massive diaspora of its population. Millions of Yemeni expatriates live abroad. While a large number of the victims of this exodus fall along ethnic and religious lines, some simply want to try to get away from the constant state of warfare. When one additionally considers the U.S. drone program and the hundreds of dead and thousands of injured it has caused, it's easy to see why so many people have left. Of those that remain, 99% are Muslim, 2/3 of them Shafi, Hanbali, and Maliki Sunni. The Shia minority are composed of Zaydis, Ismaili, and Twelvers. Poverty, unemployment, and homelessness are extremely prevalent. Combined with one of the world's shortest average life expectancies outside Africa, 64 years, making it fertile ground for political and social dissidents. Different groups pull the society in a number of directions: the secular socialists, Sharia law-endorsing conservatives, Zaydi Shia restorationists, a pro-Arab national government, Wahhabi militants, and tribal warlords at the head of various black market arms smuggling rings vie for power. The individuals known as Houthis, a name derived from the founders Muhammad and Hussein al-Houthi, are members of a group known formally as Ansar Allah, supporters of God, that has been around since 1992. Started as a Zaydi Shia religious tolerance and revival movement, it was originally known as the Believing Youth. After the beginning of American involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as the beginning of the drone program, significant anti-American and anti-Israeli sentiment has been ascribed to the group. While some have the audacity to say that this is merely because they, quote, hate our freedoms, the reality is quite different. The Israeli occupation of Palestine and its subsequent warmongering have created this sentiment, just like the U.S., United Kingdom, and all of the other members of the Coalition of the Willing created this hatred of Westerners with their foreign policy of interventionism, drone bombings, and brutal warfare. Ansar Allah members were persecuted since the days of the Saleh government, but were doubly persecuted by the Hadi government. This heavy-handed approach to dealing with political and social opposition groups actually created quite a bit of sympathy for the Houthis among the Yemeni people. The government of Yemen has gone to ridiculous lengths to attack and attempt to shut down opposition groups like the Houthis, and is responsible for some absolutely horrendous human rights violations. For a moment, let us consider the issue of laws regarding homosexuality in the modern world. When you see the American media trying to stir up the public back home about laws in Indiana and other states that are allegedly discriminatory against homosexuals, just remember that these same outlets promote this Saudi coalition, in which some of the main members like Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Pakistan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and the Yemeni government are all strict practitioners of Sharia law and kill homosexuals. Even the group being portrayed by the media as being the force behind the Houthis, Iran, is a practitioner of Sharia law and sentences homosexuals to death. This illustrates that even media outlets that portray themselves as pro-LGBT rights could, for the most part, give a damn about equality and simply use the issue as a talking point for political grist. Similarly, when American politicians rail about human rights violations, keep in mind that these same politicians approved legislation that created the modern police state and legalized the secret rendition, torture, and murder of American citizens. These same politicians approved of military genocide upon the Iraqi people based on lies, and a series of wars and coups to control a global empire that exploits every nation it possibly can, engaging in the most egregious offenses against human rights imaginable. Nothing is quite so disgusting as a hypocrite. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Sudan, Pakistan, Morocco, and Jordan, with non-military aid from nations like Oman, the United States, Turkey, and Israel, are currently waging a war of aggression against the Houthis with a complete lack of care for the Yemeni people, who they consider to simply be collateral damage. In fact, few places is it more obvious of who really controls al-Qaeda in the Islamic State than this. They too are bitter enemies of the Houthis, and strangely enough, the Assad government in Syria, Hamas and the Palestinian Authority in Palestine, the Iranian government, and any other group in the Middle East deemed an enemy to the governments of this coalition of the wicked. Between 200 and 300 coalition warplanes bomb alleged Houthi targets indiscriminately, killing dozens of innocents. This is, of course, all while the U.S. continues its drone program unfazed. The Egyptian Navy, arguably the strongest naval power of the region with the exception of Iran, has moved to secure the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, ensuring control of oil shipping in the region. So consider for a moment how many factions are at play in this solitary country a little smaller than the state of Texas. The Houthis have gained control of most of western or South Yemen. Houthi government loyalists have high numbers in eastern or North Yemen. Al-Qaeda Saudi front is on a warpath for Sharia law in central Yemen. The Southern Separatist movement is trying to re-split the country, and coalition invasion ground forces are preparing to pour across the border, and paramilitary groups and mercenaries are bolstering different factions. Division is the name of the game. The goal for foreign and domestic special interest groups is to create as much discord between the people of Yemen as possible to destabilize the country and crush any hope of a true popular Yemeni nationalist movement in order to further exploit the nation's natural resources. Around a dozen factions, each numbering in the thousands, comprised mostly of boys and young men between 15 and 24 years old, achieve this goal with ease. By the numbers, this conflict could quite easily lead to all-out warfare across the entire region. The Houthis number 100,000 strong. The Yemeni government can muster about two-thirds of that, and over 3,000 AQAP militants operate in the country. The combined forces of active military coalition member states number well over 500,000, with hundreds of warplanes and drones operating in the skies over Yemen and dozens of coalition warships patrolling the Bab el-Mandab and the southern coast. While on the surface this issue may appear to be just about reinstalling a puppet regime in Yemen, it's much more than that. This is a direct show of power meant to intimidate Iran, and also to discourage other uprisings in Arabic and North African nations by way of shock and awe military tactics. However, while the military force created by this Gulf Cooperating Council is going to be somewhat intimidating, it's going to actually spur more uprisings among disenfranchised minority groups in the region. Finally, when you add the Iranian military to the equation, which by itself rivals the entire coalition force in size, all bets are off. It is my personal opinion that this particular military conflict in Yemen will not, by itself, cause a world war, but that it is one of a series of conflicts that comprises the first phases of a world war. In this case, rather than direct military conflict between major first world powers, these nations are starting proxy wars and trying to economically and politically attack their opposition and gain the upper hand before actual direct military conflict begins. At the end of the day, all of this is really about land, trading routes, and natural resources, specifically oil. With China and India being the main trade partners of Yemen, and Russia being a long-standing political ally, especially of the pre-2011 coup Saleh government, all three major world powers have denounced the military assault on the Houthis and the Yemeni people. Some have said this ties into the current proxy wars being fought between the Anglo-American economic establishment and the BRICS nations, as well as any potential trade partners or future members for either side. But of course, without concrete evidence, it's hard to say decisively what influenced such an aggressive reaction from the coalition. To that effect, though, it is worth mentioning that China has made major deals with the Yemeni government, including a nuclear power deal worth billions. No matter what, whether you agree with the Houthis on matters of politics or theology, they are against foreign control of the Yemeni government and are much more tolerant of other denominations and religions than the conservative Al-Islah Party, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the Socialist Southern Separation Movement, or the Arab Nationalist Houthi government, General People's Congress. This is a matter that should be decided by the people of Yemen, not Saudi Arabia, not Iran, not Israel, not Egypt, and surely not the United States. Where do we draw the line at what is a legitimate government and what isn't? Who decides? What gives those who do the authority to make such arbitrary distinctions? When will Americans learn that allowing our government to engage in such action only piles up more innocent dead and quickly increases anti-American sentiment in the region? Thank you for your time.